Hi, it's Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I just did a video giving an overview of the basics of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It was long overdue given the fact that I professionally taught an after-school middle school class, Pathfinder and D&D, for me to do a basics video teaching the system. This is a follow-up to that video. I'm going to cover the top 10 most common mistakes that D&D players and Dungeon Masters make when they're new to Pathfinder 2e. On the Pathfinder subreddit, there's the occasional post coming from somebody from D&D where they complain about or have a concern about an aspect of the system. And one sees a set of common mistakes that people make that sour their initial impressions of the system that I'll include in my video today. Pathfinder 2e has the advantage of being quite similar to D&D in some superficial ways, them having the same origins, but it has the problem in that sometimes your prior knowledge and habits can hinder your learning and enjoying the system. So that's the purpose of today's video. By the way, a caveat, there are some common mistakes that Pathfinder players make that I will not include in the list today because they're mistakes that veterans, including me, have made. Those are saved for a future video down the line. Okay, so to introduce myself, I am Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who teaches and runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. For several years, I taught an after-school middle school RPG class. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation why, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. All right, let's jump straight to the list. The first is to start your first campaign at level 3. In D&D, it's quite common for campaigns to start at 3rd level. In most of D&D's history, characters in the first couple of levels are exceedingly fragile and weak. 5th edition did something extra in spreading out your basic features across the first 3 levels, viewing the first 2 levels as apprentice levels. And you earn your subclass, which is a defining choice, at 3rd level. Ronald from the future needed to add that having your first Pathfinder experience being at level 3 can be overwhelming in terms of complexity and the number of options your characters have. Well, those concerns about being weak and fragile and also having few things and few options in combat in D&D in the first couple of levels are not true in Pathfinder. You get your defining features and your subclass, if you have one. Nearly every class has a subclass in Pathfinder, at level 1. You won't feel like you're lacking in options. Here's the character sheet for Marisol, the rogue from the Pathfinder beginner box. She has 15 hit points, which is actually below average for level 1 character, and she has the class features Sneak Attack, Surprise Attack, Thief, and Trap Spotter. In combat, she has more things to do than just strike. She also wants to set up ways to make an enemy off guard to her, to lower their armor class by 2, and to get a juicy sneak attack damage, which, by the way, you can get multiple times per turn. Something as simple as striding, which costs an action to get into flanking position so that that enemy's off guard to you. And flanking, by the way, requires that you and your ally be on opposite sides of the target. There are things you can do with your skills too, and Marisol has a lot of skills as a rogue at level 1. With her deception skill, she can feint or create a diversion to make an enemy off guard to her. With her stealth skill, she can hide and sneak. She can use her intimidation to demoralize foes, her acrobatics to tumble through foes, and with her athletic skill, she could do several things, including grapple, reposition, shove, trip, and disarm. These are all things that she can do with Pathfinder's 3-action economy, all at level 1. The prevailing recommendation is when you're new to Pathfinder to start at level 1. However, I add a caveat, which is also accepted, which is that GMs want to be careful at level 1. Level 1 characters are significantly squishier than they are even at level 2. For most people, you don't want their first experience with Pathfinder to be what feels like an unfair death. I recommend not using monsters higher than level 2 at first level. All right, the next common mistake is forgetting your 4 free boosts to your ability scores, called attributes in Pathfinder, at first level. When Pathfinder first rolled out, the designers touted the character creation system, calling it the ABCs, meaning you first chose your ancestry, your background, and your class. Each of those steps improved your attributes. However, this has led to many people forgetting the last step, which is to improve 4 of your attributes, 4 different ones. What you see is from the new remastered player core book, which makes it harder to forget this, but it's still a common problem. Now, somebody out there on the internet suggested a fourth step that is the next letter in the alphabet, D, saying, don't forget your 4 free boosts. And I turned that into my own mnemonic. This is something I posted on the subreddit, expanding it. A, B, C, D, E, F, which includes don't forget your 4 boosts and that your modifiers should total 9. E is for equipment, and F is to finalize your skills, spells, and languages. All right, the third common mistake is not maxing out key stats on your character. Some will point out that there are exceptions, and they exist, and I will get to those, but it's important to establish the general rule first. Here I'm talking about maxing out what I would call your attack stat, whatever your character uses most to attack enemies. So if you're making weapon attacks a lot, you want to have a +4, 18 in the old system, in your strength or dexterity. If you cast spells, you want a +4 in your main spellcasting stat. People from other systems tend to underestimate the power of +1 in Pathfinder, and the reason it's so powerful is the 4 degrees of success system. Because you critically succeed or critically fail if you are 10 away from the number, +1 not only affects your chance to succeed, but also to critically succeed or to avoid a critical failure. And this is true with nearly everything, from weapon strikes to grapple checks and saving throws. Now, there's 2 exceptions to the general rule of getting a +4 in your key stat. One is you have a group that's less interested in optimizing their characters for whatever reason, which is a perfectly valid way to play. The GM should just be conscientious of that and design encounters accordingly. Second, there are certain builds, like a War Priest cleric wants to bonk with a weapon, but literally cannot get their weapon attack stat up to +4 because their key ability score as a cleric is Wisdom. They then lean into spells that are mostly support spells that don't attack another creature. Go to any Pathfinder forum where someone gives as general advice, put a +4 in your main attack stat, and someone invariably says, no, that's not always true. I will tell you from personal experience, having GM'd over 200 Pathfinder 2e characters, that I would say 95% of those characters add a +4 to their main stat at level 1. That's how expected it is. Now, this might sound exceedingly rigid to people coming from D&D, but Pathfinder is quite generous when it comes to improving your attributes. You get a total of 9 net boosts at level 1, and you get to repeat this last step of 4 boosts at level 5 and every 5 levels afterward. They don't compete with your feats, and the way it works is you have to spread these boosts around. You are made to generalize. The other key stat that level 1 players might neglect is armor class. You might get away with a low armor class in D&D, but in Pathfinder it is quite deadly. If you are a wizard with no bonus to dexterity with an AC of 13, then this level 3 ogre warrior with a +12 attack bonus just needs to roll an 11 or higher to critically hit you. And their weapon is deadly, so it does an average of 30 damage. And because that's at least double Mauriciel's hit points that we saw earlier, that would instantly kill Mauriciel. Again, I don't recommend level 3 enemies against level 1 parties. So level 1 characters want to, if not max out, at least not completely neglect their armor class. Another thing in Pathfinder that people don't realize is that anyone can use shields. It costs you an action, but it increases your armor class by 2 until your next turn, which is huge in preventing critical hits, especially. For people who don't know what to do with their third action, that is one thing anyone can do. The next common mistake is kind of an umbrella category. It's people assuming something in Pathfinder does exactly the same thing as in D&D because their names are identical or very similar. Previous D&D experience makes Pathfinder very approachable. It gives you familiarity with the big things like attack rolls, armor class, and saving throws, but it could be an obstacle to learning the little things. A big example of this is Attack of Opportunity, which sounds like Opportunity Attack from D&D. It's been renamed Reactive Strike in the remastered, but still a lot of people lump it together in their heads with D&D's Opportunity Attack. First of all, not every creature has it, and second, it triggers on a lot more things, and also has the chance of disrupting some actions on a critical success, like interrupting a spell that's being cast. Basically, if you are coming from D&D and are learning Pathfinder, assume you know nothing. Start with a blank slate in your brain and read things to see what they say. They do. Some of the next mistakes fall under this same category, such as the next one. Assuming that attributes are like D&D's ability scores. They have the exact same names as in D&D, But while in D&D it's very common for people to dump intelligence and strength, in Pathfinder you might not want to do that because, for example, dexterity does not add to damage, strength does. There's one notable exception, which is the thief subclass of the rogue, which Mauricio happens to be, whose stats we're looking at right now. So in Pathfinder, weapons with the finesse trait do not add dexterity to damage. Finesse is the same word as in D&D, but it means something different. It just means you can add your dexterity to your attack bonus with a melee attack. Strength is even important for bow attacks. You add 1/2 of your strength modifier, rounded down, to your damage. Intelligence gives you more skills and languages, and as I covered in the last video, there are defined ways you can use your skills impactfully in Pathfinder. Dexterity works together with strength to improve your armor class, which is crucial for surviving. You get to add your dexterity to your AC, and strength gives you access to more protective armors. And in D&D, martial characters can get away with not thinking about their mental stats, at least not their intelligence and charisma. But skills do important things in Pathfinder. Even a meaty fighter might want to have a high charisma to feint, create a diversion, or demoralize. The next common mistake is to think that concentrate means concentration in D&D. This is another case of similar words causing confusion. A lot of spells in Pathfinder have the concentrate trait. This just means you need to concentrate when casting the spell. There's a few situations where this is important, most notably a barbarian who's raging cannot do concentrate actions. There's no concentration mechanic like in D&D where you could only have one concentration spell at a time. There's nothing like that. So in Pathfinder, you don't have to worry about, oh, am I using my concentration already? And you don't have to remember to roll something when you take damage, which I forgot all the time when I ran D&D. Some Pathfinder spells, however, have the sustained duration, which means you have to spend one of your 3 actions next turn to keep the spell going. Note that there are some spells that have a defined effect when you sustain it, such as increasing the radius of the bless spell, but have a duration of 1 minute. You do not have to sustain in order to keep that spell going. These next common mistakes are made during combat encounters. Number 7 is thinking that some actions that were free in D&D are free in Pathfinder. And I say free in quotes because some of those things weren't actually free, but I won't get into that right now. People see the 3-action economy and think, woohoo, yay, I can do more things per turn. Well, actually, there are some things like moving your speed, interacting with an object that costs an action in the system that didn't before. Standing costs an action. Recalling knowledge about a creature or a topic costs an action. By the way, you can't split your movement. If you want to walk past a foe and hit them on the way, you got to spend an action to stride, an action to strike, and a third action to move again. Well, this sounds like it sucks, but there are definite upsides. First, it's definitely simpler. You don't have to deal with action types like bonus actions. In D&D, striding 2 times would require using your main action. Everything being exchangeable for each other leads to more interesting decisions. For example, do you want to make a second weapon strike at a -5 penalty because of the multiple attack penalty rule? Or do you want to raise your shield to increase your armor class by 2? Also, these costs for everything apply to enemies too, and smart players will use this fact to their advantage. So let's take that big scary level 3 ogre from earlier. Let's mess up its action economy, and Mauricio can run up to it. She can trip it and make it land prone. It now has to spend a full action to stand up, and the fighter can be standing right there with his reactive strike, who can attack when somebody does a move action like standing. Because movement costs actions, it's easy to fall into the habit of, let's say you are a tough, meaty fighter, of running up to something and hitting them, which definitely works fine in D&D and other systems. And this is a tip that I give credit to Knights of Last Call, who has an excellent series of videos on tactics in Pathfinder. Sometimes you just want to let them run up to you. Why would the fighter and rogue spend 2 actions each to run up to an ogre and attack with their third action? It can attack you 3 times at that point. Why not have the ogre spend 2 of its actions walking up to you? This next common mistake I kind of covered before, but I'll elaborate on it more now, which is attacking 3 times and also standing in place, which is clearly related. In Pathfinder, you have the multiple attack penalty, where every attack after the first is less and less accurate and has diminishing returns. Some weapons have the agile trait, which reduces this multiple attack penalty. This means that that third attack is usually a waste. Very often you need to roll a natural 20 to attack a higher level foe. This ogre has an armor class of 17. This is actually low for a level 3 creature. 18 and 19 are more typical. There are many other things besides that Hail Mary of a third attack that you can do that do not suffer from the multiple attack penalty. Something as simple as moving can make you more effective. Striding to flank a foe makes it off guard. Mauriciel has a +7 attack normally, and this ogre has an armor class of 17. She needs to roll a 10 on the die to hit and a natural 20 to critically hit, and here are the statistics and the average damage. Making the ogre off guard somehow, such as by feinting, creating a diversion, will lower its armor class by 2 and triggers your 1d6 sneak attack damage. This rogue can now critically hit the ogre, rolling an 18 or higher. If she's flanking it, then it's off guard to her second attack. This leads to much more damage. And another third action that you can do, one of the best defensive moves in the game, is to simply walk away. In fact, it's only a small minority of monsters, at least at low levels, who have opportunity attacks. Maybe you don't want that ogre with its +12 to attack attacking you 3 times. Your armor class at level 1 is probably 18 or lower. Because it's higher level, even the ogre's third attack has a fair chance of hitting you. So if you walk away, you deny them a third attack. Even better if her speed is high enough so that the ogre has to spend 2 actions walking up to her and can only attack her once. The next common mistake is to think of yourselves as individuals. In other systems, including 1st edition Pathfinder, you could just think about your character and do your own thing. You can make a broken build that did its thing that could win fights. It might have been optimal to do the same thing over and over and do what is called among some gamers a rotation. In fact, there's a cottage industry of people making videos of broken builds in D&D. You can be a fairly successful YouTuber in the D&D space. You can't really do that in Pathfinder 2e, which in many people's minds is to the benefit of the game. One of the most watched videos about Pathfinder 2e is by somebody quitting Pathfinder, saying that it allowed for rotations in combat. I did a video rebuttal. The thumbnail is on the screen, basically showing that's not true. I did a combat demonstration where every character did their own rotation, and it didn't turn out well for them. For example, a melee fighter ran into the enemies and got isolated from the party. And then I ran that same combat again, keeping tactics and teamwork in mind, and it goes fine. In Pathfinder, you don't want to think of yourselves as superheroes who happen to be working together, but as guerrilla fighters who need each other to succeed. Which kind of leads to the next common mistake, which is to think only about damage. The worst condition to inflict is dead, so the saying goes. But in Pathfinder, not everything is damage. Buffs and debuffs are very important. In the 4 degrees of success system, every numerical difference matters, and higher level foes will have better numbers than you. So a level 1 Mauriciel will not succeed at a straightforward exchange of blows with a level 3 Ogre Warrior. So as Don Draper from Mad Men said, if you can't take them head on,
change the conversation.
You don't like this fight? Well, maybe you should change the playing field, sometimes literally, or bend the math. Don't just do your isolated thing as an individual. Does someone else in your party need help? Is there something you can do to set up their success? Let's say you're the fighter who has a choice between making an inaccurate third attack or helping Mauriciel, the rogue, critically hit with her sneak attack damage and with her rapier, which does bonus damage on a critical hit. You can spend an action to prepare to aid to increase your chance of succeeding at that. There are many skill actions that can debuff enemies. Demoralize is great. It gives them a penalty to all of their checks and their DCs, including their spell DCs, including their armor class, because that's a target number to hit them after all. The frightened condition has a numerical value. If you succeed to demoralize, they become frightened 1, and it ticks down at the end of their turn. So maybe you want to delay your turn, which you can do in Pathfinder, until right after that Ogre Warrior is done acting. Let's say you're in a 4-person party, and let's say each of you is going to attack that ogre twice during your turn. Well, you can demoralize the ogre before you start attacking, and if you succeed, you will improve the chances of 8 attacks by your party members against the ogre, and also lowering that ogre's attacks against you. Let's say the wizard in your party went to land an important spell like Fear, which can make them frightened 3 and flee for a round if they critically fail. Well, there's a hilarious skill feat that you can choose called Bon mot, where you insult the enemy. If you can injure their pride, you distract them and lower their perception and will saves for a minute. They can remove it by insulting you back, but before they do so, that fear spell is much more likely to land and also get the best effect. As you can see, you can create a spiraling effect for the enemy. By the way, Frightened 3 kind of makes a creature 2 levels lower, numerically, stat-wise, in Pathfinder. Another way to debuff foes is through athletics actions. Grapple and Trip, each in their own way, makes an enemy off guard to everybody in the party until they can get out of it. They can try to escape a grapple, sure, but the escape action has the attack keyword, so it contributes to the multiple attack penalty. They might escape, but that ogre now has a -5 penalty to their next action to try to attack you. If they were tripped, standing up will cost a whole action and also might provoke an attack from your party fighter. As you can see, teamwork factors into how the party is built as well. The party composition, the skills you take, and the feats you choose. Another clear example of that is the level 4 rogue feat, Dread Striker, where she can treat every creature who has the Frightened condition as off guard to her attacks. So that's 10 common mistakes that D&D players and Dungeon Masters make when starting out in Pathfinder 2e. Now, those of you who know me know that I can't limit myself to 10. I have more to say. Number 11. Now, this mistake is thinking that spells are so powerful that you can automatically win a fight without much care or forethought. So spells that are quite strong in the current edition of D&D or previous editions or in Pathfinder 1st edition are not so here. Spells like Sleep or Hypnotic Pattern. Another spell that's less powerful is Polymorph from D&D, which here is called Cursed Metamorphosis. Here it's 6th rank, which is what spell levels are called in Pathfinder, instead of 4th. If they fail their saving throw, they turn into a harmless animal, but in every subsequent turn, they can spend all their actions to get a new saving throw. For it to have any reliable long duration, they have to critically fail their saving throw. But on top of that, this spell has the incapacitation trait. Basically, if it's a boss creature, specifically if its level is higher than double the spell's rank, they get to treat their degree of success as 1 degree better. So they will never critically fail on this, and if they roll what would be a failure, it turns into a success and has a partial effect. This is part of how Pathfinder makes higher level foes scary and hit in their weight class. So this is a warning to just calibrate your expectations. In D&D, success often is a game of managing your daily resources and saving your big things like your higher level spell slots for those big moments. In Pathfinder, spells can be powerful and they can win a fight when they're used well. Sometimes it makes sense to use a spell in one situation and a different spell in another situation. Hypnotize is great, especially if you can force foes to be in the area of that spell for the duration. And I've seen more than one critical hit negated entirely by the dazzled condition. Preventing one hit can turn a fight. Your strength as a spellcaster is your variety of tools and having the right tool for the job. For more on this, you may want to check out one of my videos called How to Caster Good in Pathfinder, something I made in consultation with some expert players, I would call them, who played in my games. So one example of having the right tool for the job is, say you're a high-level spellcaster and maybe you want to cast your cantrip Electric Arc. They might have a weakness to electricity damage, or you might face 2 foes that are at low health and you can take out one and possibly both of them with this cantrip. Also, as a spellcaster, you can target any defense of a foe, not just their armor class, but one of their 3 saving throws. So you might want to do the Recall Knowledge action to find out which of their saving throws is weakest. Let's go back to our old friend, the Ogre Warrior. Now you know that you might want to cast Fireball to target that reflex save, or the Fear spell to target its will save. This information also helps allies too. Now Mauriciel knows to maybe target its reflex save by trying to trip it. So let's say you have a favorite spell to cast, such as the Slow spell, which is really good in Pathfinder. It can deny them actions per turn. Well, it might not be a good idea against this ogre because it has a very high fortitude save. It's 5 and 6 higher than the other saving throws. That's a huge difference, especially with the 4 degrees of success system. The next common mistake is saving healing for knockouts. In D&D, it's very common for the healer to wait until someone is actually knocked out before casting Healing Word or some other spell on them. D&D, in fact, encourages that. It uses only your bonus action, and they can act on their turn as if nothing happened, as if they had never been knocked out. In Pathfinder, knockouts hurt. When you're unconscious, you fall prone. Remember, it takes an action to stand up, and you drop all the items you're holding, and it takes an action to pick up one item. Even worse is the fact that when you're healed, you gain the wounded condition. In Pathfinder, you die when your dying value increases to 4. When you're unconscious, you make a recovery check every turn, and your dying value can oscillate up and down. When you're wounded 1 and a knockout would put you at dying 1, it would put you at dying 2 instead. And a critical hit can put you straight to dying 3. In Pathfinder, every knockout brings you closer and closer to death. So it's better to not get knocked out to begin with. And so if you have healing spells, better to use them while they're at low health and not knocked out yet. And another thing about Pathfinder is that healing spells are more powerful than you might be used to. The classic heal spell that clerics can cast, if you spend 2 actions, heals 1d8 plus 8 hit points to one ally. And you multiply that with the spell's rank. So a level 3 cleric can cast the heal spell to heal an average of 25 health. With this kind of healing, you can prevent knockouts from happening. The next common mistake is not recovering between combats, and take your medicine. I've seen some D&D players not take time to heal themselves between combats and think that they can take on the next challenge at, say, 50% of their health. That is something you want to avoid if at all possible, because in Pathfinder, combats hit harder. Pathfinder has no concept of an adventuring day. D&D, despite claiming otherwise, has an adventuring day where as the day goes on and you have more encounters, you are losing resources, daily resources from your characters, making future fights more challenging. In contrast, Pathfinder is balanced around the individual encounter. This means that individual fights are more exciting, including the first fight of the day, but it also means that you do need to take that time to recover, to refuel. And it's pretty much essential to have somebody take the medicine skill so that you can do the treat wounds activity, where you spend 10 minutes to restore 2d8 hit points to an ally, and it can heal more as you level up and get better at the medicine skill. You can do this over and over again, time being the main limitation. Also, characters can refocus to get their focus points back so that their focus spells, which are rechargeable spells in Pathfinder, are available for the next fight. These next few are mostly addressed to game masters. The first mistake is to overwhelm players new to Pathfinder. Pathfinder 2e is a character customization wonderland. You can kind of do anything, which my last video covered. But one would be mistaken in thinking that this crunchy system does not pose challenges to some players, in fact, many players. Some people are just less comfortable with crunchy rules and many options, and there are some character options they might want to avoid. There's a world of difference between playing a barbarian, for example, and playing an alchemist in Pathfinder, or playing an animist, the spellcasting class that gets a lot of spell slots of different types, and has other key choices to make in the morning and also during the day and in the middle of combats even. Similarly, the free archetype variant is incredibly popular in the Pathfinder community. In fact, it might be the #1 most used official variant rule, where you get a bonus archetype feat every time you get a class feat. But having all of these extra feats and ability, which accumulates as you level up, may not be for some groups, at least not in your first campaign. High-level characters in Pathfinder, even without free archetype, have quite a lot going on. The next common mistake is ignoring the encounter building guidelines. The words to describe encounters in this chart actually mean what they say. Moderate is moderate, severe is severe, and extreme is extreme. And this is not the experience of game masters coming from D&D or first edition Pathfinder. Those do not have reliable encounter building systems. GMs have gotten used to treating them as guidelines, as suggestions. In D&D, a deadly encounter is not that deadly for many groups. Deadly means it begins to be challenging. Some DMs report that they have to go to double deadly, triple deadly, quadruple deadly to challenge their parties. Coming from that experience, they see severe? Oh, that can't be that bad. It can't be as deadly as deadly. So they might put 2 level 3 ogre warriors up against a level 1 party. But this is ill-advised for a number of reasons. And again, these words mean what they say. And let's just look at what moderate means. The book defines a moderate threat encounter as a serious challenge to the characters. They have to use sound tactics and manage their resources wisely in order to not have to rest before taking on harder challenges. Severe threat encounters are the hardest encounters most groups of characters have a good chance to defeat. And it writes in italics, use severe encounters carefully. There's a good chance a character could die, and a small chance the whole group could. Bad luck, poor tactics, or a lack of resources can easily turn this against the characters. An extreme threat encounter is an even match for the characters. This makes them too challenging for most uses. Use an extreme encounter only if you're willing to take the chance the entire party will die. It only might be appropriate for a fully rested group of characters that can go all out for the climactic encounter at the end of an entire campaign, or for a group of experienced vets who use advanced tactics and teamwork. So against a level 1 party, these level 3 ogres, each of them individually, is 80 XP, and so throwing both of them at the party makes this an extreme encounter. But not only that, higher level foes tend to hit harder than their XP value would show. Because, for example, here it says, while a ogre warrior on its own might be a moderate encounter, 80 XP, it is to be viewed as a moderate or severe threat boss. One ogre warrior already falls under this definition of a severe threat. On top of all this, level 1 parties are less able to handle higher level foes. They have less ability to counter the mathematical advantages that they have. In fact, I would avoid using this particular level 3 creature against a level 1 party because, as we saw earlier, a single critical hit can instantly kill a party member. In sum, level means level in Pathfinder. A level 1 character and a level 1 creature are about the same strength as each other. It's nice to know what that level number actually means in Pathfinder. However, it can shock people coming in with the wrong expectations. Common mistake number 16 is ignoring or changing core rules. There are threads in the subreddit of people reporting that they or their game master allows splitting your movement, or lets you move your speed for free once per turn, or pull out a weapon for free. I saw one nightmare post where someone removed the multiple attack penalty. A lot of these changes were kind of to preserve familiarity with 5e. Here's my one burn of D&D. People had kind of grown used to patching a system that they've learned to distrust designers, so they come into Pathfinder with the same do-it-yourself attitude. This is an example of what's called Chesterton's fence, the fallacy of taking a fence down without knowing why it was put up in the first place. But there's a reason for all of these rules. Allowing split movement removes some of the tense decisions in a combat. Do you go in all offense and leave yourself vulnerable to counterattack, or do you play it safe? And of course, every allowance you make for the players applies equally to the monsters. Removing the multiple attack penalty sounds great until you realize that the Ogre Warrior now has a plus 12 to each of its Ogre Hook attacks. Now, house rules in Pathfinder are okay, and in fact, I've done a video before on this. I'll leave a link in the description, and I plan an upcoming video on the rules lawyer's house rules. But they have to be consistent with the core design of the game, and you cannot know the core design of the game without having some experience with it first, and especially if your only experience comes from another system, where a lot of the same things might work in that system but don't translate well in this one. One needs some experience with Pathfinder and an open mind to understanding why some rules are there before tinkering. Now, the next common mistake, and this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but sometimes groups restrict themselves too much to the rules. They come in with the mindset that Pathfinder is this sacred, inviolable set of rules that you must adhere to to the detriment of the game and to fun and to, well, verisimilitude, to realism within the fantasy world. So examples, grinding a session to a halt with frequent or overly long detours to look up rules. Sometimes you should just make a call and then look it up later. Another is not allowing creative ideas by players because you don't have that ability or you don't have the feat for it. This results in players thinking within the box and what's on your character sheet. But this is a game of imagination. If it makes sense within the world, then the GM should probably accommodate it and allow for it. Let the rules enhance your imagination instead of restrict it. You might not have the bon mot skill feat, but insulting an enemy in the middle of combat is certainly fun, and a GM should find some way to adjudicate that. I did a video recently, which was a guide on improvising in Pathfinder on how to adjudicate creative actions. Link in the description. And I also point people to the same video I pointed to there by one of the co-designers of Pathfinder 2E, Mark Seifter, titled, "Don't Let Feats Stop You from Improvising." Don't let the existence of a feat in the books that you don't have prevent you from trying something. The 18th common mistake, and this is the last one, I promise, is not giving out essential treasure. Remember the mistake of forgetting your 4 free boosts at character creation? Well, this is related. There's a number of posts that come up on the subreddit where a group is frustrated by how difficult the game is after they gain several levels, and the subreddit finds out that they don't have striking runes by, say, level 6. Those are the runes that give you a second damage die with your weapons. And those are level 4 runes that a party is expected to have by around that point, around level 4. Pathfinder, thankfully, has put work into balancing magic items, assigning them levels and gold prices. Here is the chart provided in the GM book of what party treasure that you normally should give to a party at each level of play. This is all mathed out so that they're going to get those striking runes by around level 4 and get +1 weapons or +1 runes for weapons by level 2. Now, I would say these are guidelines. One does not break the game by deviating from this, at least not deviating wildly from this. However, some GMs might, for various reasons, not want to have to worry about giving +1s at a certain level, striking runes at another level. There's a whole variety of reasons for that. Well, there's an official variant rule called automatic bonus progression that Pathfinder provides. Here's the chart where it shows what bonuses parties gain at each level that normally they would be gaining from magical items. This lets a GM focus on items that are interesting. And this chart also gives guidance for GMs using the core rules about when to give what. By the way, if you are considering using this in your games, there's a popular variant to this variant rule called automatic rune progression. I did a video on it, link in the description, which you might want to consider. So that includes my top 18 list of common mistakes D&D players and DMs make. And if there's things I missed or advice you want to give to people new to Pathfinder, definitely say so in the comments. I plan to do a video on the top 10 rules that veteran players, including me, have gotten wrong in Pathfinder. I also plan to do an updated video on my Pathfinder house rules. So if you're interested in those, subscribe to my channel and also like this video, of course. Meanwhile, that's it. So here's my outro. Support my Patreon. It gives you early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And also join my Discord community. We are almost at 6,000 people. I hang out there a lot. There we discuss Pathfinder 2E and other gaming. Also, you can play Pathfinder 2E. We have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.